Once again, thank you everyone for joining in today. We are a part of AYA's Sustainable Awareness and Careers, the Innovation Challenge webinars. Today, we are having an entire presentation based on career awareness, resume preparation, interviewing, and communication tips. When we did the Innovation Challenge last year, we had like the post-event survey where the industry professionals and the youth were able to give their thoughts on what they would like to be integrated into next year's innovation challenge. One thing, like the number one theme slash topic that we had seen youth put into our surveys is that they wanted an entire webinar based on resume preparation, how to be prepared for interviews and things of that nature. That was the number one trending theme we found throughout our survey of about 50 youth. And I know we have a couple of youth here in the call as well, so it's nice to see some familiar names. We were able to we were able to get into contact with an industry professional in that lane, a professional recruiter. We were able to get into contact with Heather Hughes. We are very, very honored and happy to have her here. Heather Hughes helps people and businesses stay legal, support their employees, and ensure the growth of not only the company, but their employees. And as the owner of Heather Hughes Consulting, she works with small business owners, setting their business up for success, as well as helping to drive HR change from the inside. And, for Heather, seeing employees thrive is the most rewarding part of the role. And that was actually a big reason as to why we wanted to connect with her and get her to speak to the youth, because having that one-to-one connection has been a very common theme for youth. And that was also something they had mentioned in the post-event survey, being able to build meaningful connections with yourself as well as the work organizations that you employ yourself in. So I will be passing it over to Mr. Nat Smith, who is going to be the moderator of this call. And then once again, we'll also be passing it over to Heather Hughes. So I'll definitely let you guys take it away. And thank you so much.
All right. How are you doing, Heather?
I'm doing
All
well.
right.
How are you?
Okay. Well, Isaiah, you've already given the introduction for me. For Heather, I was prepared to do that. Um, we'll go on and see what Heather has to say about resume preparation and give y'all some good information here. So take it away, Heather.
Great. Well, hi everybody. As stated, my name is Heather. I would ask all of you to please bear with me. I have a cold, so I sound a little wonky, and you might hear me coughing and drinking some water every now and then. But I'm so excited to be here and to talk to all of you. Um, I just want to start the presentation and just go over a little bit about who I am so you can know just a little bit about me and where I come from. So I'm originally from Chicago, born and raised. Go Bears. Um, and I have been working in HR for over 18 years. I actually started out in HR as a receptionist, and I had literally worked my way up through the ranks within HR. I have touched every single component in HR that one can. And so I've been able to develop knowledge and skills in all areas of HR. Like most of us, the pandemic changed everything for me. It's at that point that I realized that I wanted to be able to open my own consulting business to really help not only small businesses, but help employees find their best foot within companies. I thoroughly believe that employees are the rock and the foundation of companies. And if you don't have good employees, happy employees, you won't have happy customers. And just a little fun fact so you guys can have something fun about me. I am a giant comic book nerd. I love all things DC and Marvel. My favorite comic family is actually the Fantastic Four. So,
Right.
let's go ahead and just jump right into our first big topic, shall we? And I want to talk about resumes. So, right off the bat, it's really important to just know that it's okay. You don't need to be worried. I know resumes can be a little scary when you first look at them and think about them, but if you think about the resume as a billboard to advertise and highlight your best self, that's exactly what it is. It is the tool to showcase who you are and what you've accomplished. I always tell people that this is your opportunity to highlight key successes and achievements you've had at your jobs. But it's very important to not forget that you want to call out those volunteer experiences. They carry across all levels of your job. Even CEOs will list their volunteer and board experiences on their resumes. This shows your employer that you're engaged, you're willing to go that extra step, and you understand the value of having a connection to the community. Excuse me. I want to also let you know that there are some really amazing tools available to people to use to build resumes. I think people underestimate the Google templates that they have when you open up a Word doc in Google Docs. Their templates are fantastic. And from a professional point of view, unless you are an executive level person, you are applying for those chief executive positions, paying somebody for a resume is not something that you need or should do. There are wonderful free resources that are actually built really well. I also think it's important that we mention ChatGPT or ChatGPT. And it's coming up. It's embedding itself in more and more things that we do nowadays. How many people on this call have used or currently use Grammarly? That's ChatGPT. And so what I tell everybody is that right now you're going to hear a lot of people on multiple platforms. I know that this is a hot topic on TikTok too, about needing to have the right resume to get through the applicant tracking systems, and you got to use ChatGPT to do that, and you can. But the HR softwares that we use as professionals right now are not at the point where they can leverage that ChatGPT. We are using software that was created and built before ChatGPT came into play. So the most efficient thing you can do is actually lining your resume up with the job description that was posted that you're applying for. If ChatGPT can help you pick out a few keywords or sentences to plug in there, that's great. But having to make 12, 15, 20 different resumes and running them through these ChatGPT softwares so you can get through a screening and applicant system, it's not worth it, because I can tell you 100% HRIS softwares are not at the point where they're filtering that out right now. Okay. Listing your skills. I think sometimes people forget that, but it's a really big thing. As an HR professional, I always make sure that I put on my resume any HRIS software that I have used, any human resources information software I've used, because there are a multitude of platforms out there, and not every business is going to use the same one. So by able to putting on my resume that I've used this software and this software, it shows them that I have knowledge and versatility. And I would also stress you want to keep your resume updated. And I know you've probably heard everybody tell you that, but it's the most important thing that you can do if you walk away with anything that sticks in your brain today for me, is to keep your resume updated. Anytime you have been a part of a team that's achieved a success on a big project, or you've helped roll out an initiative, or you got a title change, the first thing you should do is open up that resume and quickly add that to your resume. because the more up to date it is, the more accurate it is, the more it's going to highlight yourself. Because remember, your resume is your billboard.
Mhm.
Okay. And the last thing with resumes, they don't have to be super fancy. You want to keep it as simple as you can. You want to put your name, your city, state, and zip is great. You don't want to put down your actual physical address. Always put a phone number and an email address. If you have a LinkedIn profile, that's a great thing to add there as well. And if you don't, that's okay. Put your jobs. You want to go, a good point is you could do a month/year through the month/year. So you could say that you've worked at this job from December of 2022 through October of 2024. That's a great range. You don't have to get drilled down to the dates. And then you want to just put in a brief summary of what you did there, and then put some highlights of the achievements and successes you've had in that role. Make sure you call out your education, again, your volunteer opportunities, and your skills on there. You don't need to put references on your resumes anymore, because if a company wants to do references, they're going to actually ask you for those. But most of the time, that's just going to be something that they check off by doing an employment verification if the position requires it. So before I move forward to the next part, I just want to stop and see if there are any questions specifically about resumes.
I guess I actually do have a question. So as far as like for the last part, like keeping it simple, how do you find like the balance between like listing everything you've done like in your career slash also adding like the your relevant experience for like the application? Because like I used some of my first jobs were at like Dunkin' Donuts back when I was like in high school, but I don't
Mhm.
know if like that's like something relevant enough that I need to like add onto my resume, because like at that point, like what if like my resume is too long and they'll be like, oh, this is a 2-3 page resume, like this guy is just like bragging about everything he's done. Then and then yeah, it just goes back to like the whole minimal, like efficiently written stuff that you were mentioning earlier.
No, those are great questions. So I'm going to split that into two. So for one, I would say my rule of thumb for everybody is 7 years.
Mm.
That is what you're going to find as your standard average across application tracking systems. When you apply for jobs, they're looking for 7 years of experience. And by experience, they mean just 7 years of jobs that you've had. Now, does that mean that in some cases, as you go further along, you might only have 1 or 2 jobs? Absolutely, because you might only have 2 jobs that cover that 7 year gap. Sometimes you might have more, but rule of thumb is 7 years. Okay. As for the details of the positions, think about it again as sort of a Cliff Note version for that role. So you
Mm.
want to put in key highlights of what you were expected to do, and then a couple bullet points below that little blurb that highlight the key successes and wins that you had in that. So to your point, we'll use Dunkin' Donuts. You can say maybe your position was, store system manager. The blurb may say something like, was expected to open and close store, ensure that cash registers were up to date and accurate, and supplies were fully stocked, staff was fully available, and schedules were set at the appropriate times. And then below that is where you would put in key bullet points of any wins you might have had in that role. Maybe you identified um, a repetitive staffing window, that there was a slow time, and by making some adjustments to the schedule, you were able to fill that gap and ensure that there was constant coverage.
Mm.
Maybe you were able to help implement a new process to help with stock and volume, and you guys were constantly running real short on one thing, but by implementing this new tool, you were able to overcome that challenge and then became no longer an issue. If you think more of along the lines of Cliff Notes,
Mm-hmm.
that opens up the conversation when you're having that back and forth with the recruiter or the hiring manager of asking them, so I see here that you implemented a new process for stock management. Can you tell me a little bit about that? So that Cliff Note drives that conversation.
Right. It looks like Anarit in the chat has said, what if you what if you've had experience that is not relative to the job you're applying for? Would you still want that? Seeing that it's just making your resume longer than a page, and you have plenty other experience that might be better to present on the resume?
I would say one, go with the rule of thumb. If it's 7 years, keep it on there. And you can tweak the role if you are able to find small bits and points that connect to the job you're applying for, go ahead and do that. But if it's keeping 7 years of jobs on your resume, then I would keep it on. If it's not, you can take it off.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
Are,
you.
are employers like strict about like the 1 page, like 2 page resume rule, or am I just
No,
am I
that's
thinking it up and
so funny
overthinking it? Yeah.
because I think at one point in time there truly was, and I think it goes back to Ben when people would actually come in and they would hand them paper
Yeah.
copies of resumes.
Mhm.
And the rule of thumb back then was basically you didn't want to go above 2 pages. But now everything's done electronically. And I hate to tell you this, but even with the work you do on your resume, you're still going to have to fill out a digital application. And so you're still going to have to put all everything from your resume into an application online. But if you follow that 7 year rule, it's really not going to make a big impact on if it's 1 page, 2 page, 3 page, because you're providing them the information that's going to align with what applications now have as a standard across everything. And
Mhm.
that's 7 years of job experience.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, because like like I try to like keep like my resume clean to like 1 page, but then like as more stuff comes on, like I keep having to like lower the font and just like now it's like to the point where like it's not even like entirely legible like that, but I just wanted to stay like super, super clean. So
Absolutely.
and then I guess I did have one more question. As far as like highlighting like the different experiences slash careers you've had, is I know like the standard is to like make it like chronological as far as like your timeline of where you've worked and when, but have you ever like ran into someone who's like swapped some around just to have like their most relevant experience at the top, even though like it may have been like a job from like 3 or 4 years ago and not the current job they're in? They feel like it's a job that's most like applicable slash like yeah slash applicable to the job they're applying for.
So it's kind of a yes and no answer
Mm.
because I've seen where a lot more of the online application systems are asking the person to identify a role that they think best aligns with the position they're applying for. So it could be a role that happened maybe 3 years ago and could be down in that chronological time frame that they're calling out. But on the resume, it still stays in that chronological order. I'm
Right.
seeing that happen across a lot of applicant tracking systems now, where the person's filling in and they're like, is there a specific role that you want to highlight? And you will say, please see, sales manager role, and then it would highlight that for the recruiter when they're doing it. I know actually too, Indeed has started to do that when people are sending in applications through their website and they're responding to ads. They actually ask people, is there a role that you want to highlight that's relevant to this position? And the person can type it in.
Mhm. Cool. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, we love Indeed. I'm familiar with that one too. So yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course.
so Heather,
Yeah.
every job I've ever applied for also asks for a cover letter. So one, I'd be interested to know what your opinion is on cover letters in the first place, and two, how the information in the cover letter should differentiate from the information provided in the resume.
That's a great question. And I will tell you that you are starting to actually see more and more jobs not asking or mandating a cover letter anymore. Because the applicant tracking systems are so smart now with them being electronic and the development that's going into them, that the cover letter is basically just an extra piece of document. They're still letting people submit it, and it's going into a section that says optional, but more and more jobs are saying that it's no longer a requirement. Now, that being said, if you feel like you want to do a cover letter, absolutely. There's nothing wrong with submitting a cover letter for your resume, which is basically giving a synopsis and a quick highlight of just compressing everything you have into that statement. But as a requirement, more and more companies are moving away from having that be a mandated thing when you are applying for jobs.
Interesting. All right, thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Like, yeah, just to add on to that, because when I learned about like cover letters back in like high school and college, like the number one thing they always told me is like obviously like it's optional depending on like where you do it, but they always let me know since it adds like that personable touch to applications, you kind of get like brownie points essentially to the people you apply for. So I don't know if you could claim if there's any validity to that. If like your application is like put above others because you went out of your way to write like a personal like note / cover letter to them.
I'm glad you asked that, and I can tell you with 100% accuracy as somebody who's actively done recruiting, it does not.
Cool.
The applications come in the exact order that they were submitted. So if you submitted your application at 10:18 a.m. and another person submitted theirs at 10:20 a.m., you're going to be below the person that did theirs at 10:20 because it goes in time order that it was sent in. It doesn't bump it to the top if there's a cover letter. It doesn't bump it to the top if there's a note attached. It may put a little asterisk for the recruiter to know if their person was a referral, like an in-house candidate recommended that person. So that gets called out specifically for the recruiter. But I can confirm with 100% accuracy that there is no brownie point bumps you to the top of the list, not with the current applicant tracking systems used.
Okay, thank you. That's very relieving because I've spent way more time writing cover letters than like actually applying to like places. So that's
Yeah.
good to know. Thank you.
Now, I will say too, the further up you go into, especially in white collar businesses, the further up you go, in those positions when you get to like a lot of the executive levels, they may require that. And I see that happening. But again, it's about the position you're applying for. So if you're applying for an executive position, that kind of goes hand in hand with that.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much. Totally.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, then let's move on to interviews. So for interviews, again, I think is really important to start and say it is 100% okay to be nervous. Breathe. It is okay and it's actually normal to be nervous with an interview. But you just want to remember that this is your opportunity to showcase your best self. Okay? Remember how I said that resume is a walking billboard for you? That's exactly what this is. Okay? You are going to have the opportunity to expand on everything that initially caught the eye of that recruiter or hiring manager from your resume. So this is that opportunity for them to say, hey, I saw from your bullet point, you were able to expand, sales in this area. Can you tell me more about that? And that's where you can really just lay it all out there and make yourself shine. You want to make sure to highlight your successes and your wins as much as you can in that interview and relating them to the position you're applying for. So if the position is a sales position and you're going to be talking about how they want you to go into these markets and sell and bring on more clients, you can say how you were able to do X, Y, and Z at this past job, and this is what you were able to produce. And with that knowledge and the skills you gained there, I know I could be able to do this over here for you and do the same thing because I have the experience over there. Okay.
Mhm.
Hmm. Another thing I want to call out is that appearance matters. And it's by that I mean is that if you're going to an interview, right now, lots of interviews, even the pre-screens are happening virtually.
Mhm.
But it's how you show up in that presentation. So you want to make sure that you're not showing up in a tank top or some casual t-shirts, that you want to look at it, you're presenting yourself as the best as you possibly can. Okay. The one big question I want to take some time to focus on is what I call the dreaded tell me a time questions.
Mhm.
You will run into lots of these in your interviews because recruiters and hiring managers love these. They actually have books built where they tell people how to build these questions. Okay. So there are going to be times where they're going to be like, tell me about a time that you had to deal with a challenging customer, a
Mhm.
challenging coworker. Tell me about a time that you had to deal with an unfortunate situation. Anything you can think of, they're going to come up with. They will come up. And what it's doing is it's forcing you to think outside of the box in that situation. And so what I always tell everybody is if you can, one of the best way to overcome these tell me a time question hurdles is to take the question and connect it back to something in your past that you experienced.
Mhm.
Because you're most comfortable if it's something that you already know. So tell me a time that you had to deal with a challenging coworker. Immediately, it sets you up for that. You need to connect it to something in your past. Okay. So think back to something that you had to deal with where you had a challenging coworker and you had to work through that situation. Okay. Then you want to talk a little bit about it, give them a synopsis. This is what happened. This is what I experienced. Then you want to immediately work into how you were able to overcome that. These are the steps that I took. This is how I engaged. This is what we worked on trying to overcome. And then you say, this is what the resolution was. So by laying out those steps, you're acknowledging the question, how you worked through the problem, what the steps that were taken that you were able to do that, and then what the resolution was. So you've answered their question, you've been able to connect it to something in your past, and it puts you in a comfort zone because you're drawing on information you already know. If you take that format and you apply it to every one of those tell me about a time questions, it's going to make those questions less of a potential hazard for you.
Mm.
Some really important things to remember not to discuss. What I call are the EEOC red flags. You do not, you should not be talking about or asking any questions when it comes to age, religion, sexual orientation, ethnic backgrounds, disabilities, your family, or your marital status. And absolutely 100% do not answer anything about political stances or questions.
Mhm.
If someone asks you these questions, and I'm just going to use the easiest one for me is, oh, that's great. So, how do you feel? Are you looking to start a family yourself soon, Heather? What
Right.
I would want to do is politely navigate away from that question. And the easiest way to do is just be like, thank you so much. I think that maybe right now I would like to focus more on the position and we can talk some more details about my skills and the leverage and the opportunities that this would provide and what I could bring to the position for you and the team. You don't want to answer those questions. And I will be very frank with you. If somebody were to ask me any of these questions in an interview, that is a huge red flag for me that that's not an organization I want to be a part of. Because a good organization knows that you shouldn't be asking those questions. And that makes me wonder what else they do that I don't want to be aligned with.
Mhm.
Okay. Always have some questions at the end of the interview. And I know people kind of worry about this. Like, what am I going to do? I don't know what to ask. And our first instinct is to say, well, can you tell me about the pay? Can you tell me about the benefits? And those are good questions. But you want to show them that you're committed to the process, but you're really interested in the role. So, two questions that are always questions I ask any interview I'm in. I'm going to share with you guys now, and you are welcome to steal them and use them wildly. One is, what does success look like to you for the person in this role? And the second one is, how do you see this position developing over the course of the next year? Both of those are open-ended questions. It makes the person think about what they want, and they get to talk about the future, if there's something coming down the pipeline, is there a big project, is there something happening that they're talking about what could be coming. So that gives you more insight. Now, these are questions that I will tell you you would want to ask the hiring manager, because again, I'll be honest with you, a recruiter's not going to ask these. The recruiter, these are the questions you could ask them is like, could you tell me a little bit more about the schedule? Is there any flexibility when it comes to if I have to work remote for a couple of days? Those are the type of questions the recruiter is going to be able to ask for you. The more detailed, specific questions about the position, you want to ask those for your hiring manager. Maybe if you have to interview with a VP as well, those are the questions you want to ask them. Let's pause here and see, do we have questions about interviews? Okay.
Yeah, seemed pretty straightforward. Yeah, like
Yeah. So after that, I mean, the only thing I have left to say is, if you guys have any questions or you want to just ask for some help, here's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help. But I know that going through the process of setting up your resume and going through an interview can be scary. But I think that if you just follow these little steps, I definitely believe that you guys would be able to shine and thrive successfully.
Well, Heather, I don't have any questions, but I did want to make a comment on the last point for the interviews. I always struggled with what to ask the interviewer, and I've never considered those questions, but I really do like them, and trust me, I'll be using them in the future.
yeah, they kind of seem like cheat codes. Like
Yeah.
I wrote those ones down in my phone notes. So
Absolutely. I think those are the types of questions that if you ask those types of questions, it pushes the person you're interviewing with to give you more information about the position that maybe they haven't been sharing with you. And so you get in more insight to, how is this person as a manager? How is this person as a leader? Does it come across like when the question I like is, what does success look like for you for this person? Based on how they say, I can get a sense, are they a micromanager? Are they someone that's going to be able to just let me sit back and do my thing and shine? I think those questions can open up doors. And if you have more questions along those lines, it helps you get more insight into what's going on in the position.
that's very helpful. Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome.
And then again, if anyone does have any additional questions, feel free to unmute whenever, or you could put it in the chat and we'll definitely read it out for you guys. But yeah, like in like all your years of experience as like a HR person slash like professional recruiter, I get I don't I don't want to make this like an on the spot question, but like have you ever like ran into like applicants who had like immediate glaring red flags with that you just like immediately decide no, like we're not going to consider you? I don't know if that's like a specific question, but then of course, like not it's not people that intended to make it like a red flag or whatever, but stuff that just like immediately turned off potential applicants in a resume or whatever.
It wasn't in the resume. It ended
Mhm.
up being in the interview.
Interview, right? That makes sense.
And since when I would be doing recruiting, I would do sort of what would be considered the pre-screen. So that's what a lot of the recruiters do is they like to do like 15 to 30-minute phone calls where they can touch base with the applicant and just tell them a little bit more about the position and get a little bit more information from the person. And in that pre-screening call, if I am talking to a candidate and they're not fully engaged in the conversation,
Right.
maybe they're talking to me, but at the same time they're going, Shh, I'm on a phone call right now.
Mhm.
Or if they're doing something like that, that tells me that maybe they're not going to be engaged in the position. I will tell you that sometimes it's happened twice. I've had a candidate who other people were a little iffy on their resume, but I was like, you know what? I think this is somebody that I want to talk to and do some more, you
Mm.
know, digging on them with. And talking to them expanded a lot more on their resume. And they ended up having the type of personality we were looking to have with the team. They understood the level of engagement we wanted to have. And so don't be afraid if you get tapped for that screening call, because it could be too that somebody like very much like me was like, I saw your resume, it intrigued me just enough that I want to open up that door and have some more exploratory conversation with you.
Mhm.
Because a lot of time that's what it is. Because again, if you're treating the resume like a bulletin board for you, like a billboard, you're just putting in those cliff notes, and it's those cliff notes that are going to get them to get in and just be like, I want to learn more about this person. I want to learn more why they did that, and that's going to be the hook to get them in.
Right. As far as like that distraction part, I know that makes sense, like if people are like in a Zoom call where like they're at home with the distractions or whatever. But have you ever experienced anyone being like distracted like that in like an in-person interview, like they
Oh
check
yeah,
their phone or whatever? So
yes. Um, the cell phone can be your enemy.
yeah, totally. It's my
So
enemy.
I always I will tell you guys, so my brother-in-law recently transitioned from military to civilian,
Mhm.
and I helped him prepare for his interviews and his resume. And I told him, put your cell phone on silent, keep it in your pocket until you walk out of the door. Because if it's an emergency, they will be able to get hold of other people until they can get a hold of you. But when you're in that interview, you want to be 100% focused on that interview.
Mhm.
I've had people in the interview where they've put the cell phone on the table, and that's fine. That doesn't bother me. But the cell phone is not muted, so it's constantly dinging or it's vibrating. Or my favorite is when the phone's camera light starts going off nonstop every time there's a text message, so you have it flashing all over the walls. Um, so if you have your phone, just for that time period, put it on silent and then put it away. For 30 minutes, it's okay for you not to be on your cell phone. That's the biggest distraction that I have seen.
Cool. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, well,
Yeah, it
any
does
more
sound like a good,
questions?
right. Mhm.
What time do we have? Well,
Yeah, we'll be able to give like half the time back, like 45 minutes back to you guys. So yeah, I'll definitely pass it over to you, Mr. and Heather, if you guys have any final words to close up the call.
I have a quick question.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Um, Once you apply to a job, do you think it's worth reaching out to the hiring manager? And if you do reach out to them, what would you say?
So I'm glad that you asked that. And I will tell you what I've heard from both sides of the fence. Okay. I have heard from managers where they're like, they absolutely do not want anybody reaching out to them. They want everything to go through the recruiting team because they're worried that if the person contacts the manager directly, that they're going to constantly be going to them throughout the entire process. And if they look at it from the point of view of what if I chose not to move forward with that candidate, they're going to come back to me and be like, why didn't you pick me? Why was I good enough? And they don't want to be in the position to have to respond. And I have some hiring managers who like when people reach out to them. So this is what I tend to tell people. When you're initially applying for the position, I would just work with the recruiter that you're working with. If you get through the screening call, you're going to get the invites and have the names and email addresses for the hiring manager for those positions. Once you do that, then that's an excellent opportunity for you. After you've had that meeting, you can send them an email directly and be like, I wanted to connect. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed meeting with you. I feel I could be a great fit for this opportunity and I could bring so much to the team. If you have any extra questions, you can send them over at that point, at that time as well. But I always lean on the side of waiting until you get to that next position where you get their name and information. So that way it's not putting you or the hiring manager in a difficult position.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because like it's similar to like the personable vibe that I was talking about regarding like the cover letter. Like I like especially if it's like a job where I'm really, really passionate about. Of course I like mass apply to places, but there's like specific places where I like, oh, like this is like a dream position where like I really want to be here. And, like I want to go out of my way to show these people I'm passionate for it. But yeah, sometimes like those lines are blurry as to like what boundary can you cross, like let them know like, hey, like we're very, very committed to something like this, even if we may not be like as qualified or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will tell you this very frankly, a recruiter will let a hiring manager know if a candidate's highly engaged.
Hmm.
I have interviewed candidates and I have told the hiring manager, because I will speak to them after
Yeah.
I've had my little touch base with them. I'll be like, okay, so let's set up some time. We'll go through the candidates I've screened for you. And I'll be like, I talked to this person. They're really great. I think, that they could work out. But this person right here, John, this guy, he is in it. He is 100% in for this role. He's completely engaged. He asked some great questions. I think when he talks to you, he's going to ask some even better questions. So having that engagement with the recruiter can make a big difference.
Yeah, I guess that also does go align with like the first impression principle where like you pretty much only have you only assume that that's like your only chance you get.
Yep.
So
Okay,
Well, if you guys think of any other questions or you need any help, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help.
yeah, and we'll definitely send out this presentation / contact info to all of our youth / attendees as well. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
very much, Evan.
Such a
Okay.
pleasure.
All right, folks.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, have a good one, guys. We'll definitely be here next week with the next webinar, but we'll definitely be sending out Heather's contact information and everything said above. But once again, thank you for everyone for attending. Thank you once again to Miss Heather Hughes for the fantastic presentation. I learned a lot of stuff from it personally, so I do plan on implementing it. And yeah, we hope to see a lot of you guys next week for the following webinar. So thank you so much, and we hope you guys have a great rest of your week.